Okay, so we're going to get started here. I know, Callie, I know you're in trend, so I want to make sure we get in the hour that we need for the presentation. But just to give a brief introduction of myself and Callie, my name is Celia Loomis. I'm the Digital Media Coordinator here at ACTE. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our PARCC online seminar. We greatly appreciate it. Our presenter today is Callie Riley, and she currently serves as PARCC Inc.'s Senior Policy Associate for State Engagement and Outreach. In this role, she focuses on K through 16 educator and state leader engagement strategies for PARCC and for PARCC Common Assessment Consortium. Sorry about that, Callie. If I messed up your introduction a little bit, I apologize. Hi there, Callie. Are you available?
Hi. Yes. Sorry, I didn't realize that was the transition.
Oh no, I apologize.
Am I able to move the slides myself?
Yes, you are. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar today. I really appreciate it. You know, it's in the middle of the day, and this is a really busy time of year after Thanksgiving and before the holidays. So I actually have a pretty lengthy slide deck here, but what I'm going to try to do is go through some of the really some of the major pieces about the PARCC assessment, and also give you an idea of what resources are available for educators. Again, my name is Callie Riley, and my job is really to talk to the K-16 audiences. I actually manage the higher education work at Achieve as well. So I've actually been very intimately involved in all of the work around college and career readiness, the policies and the practices. And in fact, I'm traveling back from a very similar conference right now. So our agenda for today, first you'll see that we're just going to go over a little bit about what is PARCC. Next, we'll be talking about how will PARCC measure college and career readiness. Next, we'll talk about how did the field test go and what's next. And then also we're going to review what types of resources are available for educators. And then finally Q&A, and then a little bit about how you can contact PARCC and me. So what is PARCC? This is a really great question. PARCC is actually the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career Common Assessment Consortium. You can see the map there on your screen. And those are states that are currently serving as governing board states in the PARCC consortium. You'll see that the PARCC members include these 12 states plus the District of Columbia. And there are going to be about 5 million students that will be taking the assessment in the 2014-15 school year, which actually just launched yesterday. So yesterday was the very first day of our fall block administration, which will go through mid-January, and then we'll launch the full assessment starting in mid-February. So just a little bit about what does it mean to actually be a governing state. So what you see are the states that have committed really from the very beginning to actually helping design and develop the assessment system. So can I hear some people talking in the background? Okay. And so these states are the ones that have been at the table. The commissioners of education, also your commissioners of higher education in these states have been the primary policy decision makers, along with your directors of assessments, along with thousands of educators from across the state's K-16 that have been intimately involved in not just the design and the development of the assessment, but also things like item review, policy review, working groups, our educator leader cadre. The list really goes on and on and on. So I'd like to talk about PARCC tests, and we talk about how they're developed by the state for the state and developed by educators for educators. And what does that actually mean? So we have a few different bullets that you'll see up here on the screen, and I'm going to talk through them. You'll see that first bullet talks about how really what we're doing is we're designing tests not only that measure the Common Core state standards, but measure them deeply. So when we think about deep measurement, we're actually talking about measuring problem solving and critical thinking skills in the full range of standards. You'll really see that reflected in the assessment design, which I'll show you in just a little bit, and the way that it's kind of segmented out. And when we talk about the full range of standards as well, we're talking about how these are really different kinds of standards. We're very aware that embedded in the Common Core is the idea of the progression of standards, this idea that as you go through time, they're actually spiraling. When students come back to concepts, they're coming back to those concepts at a higher level. This means that we really have to look at what student performance looks like over time. We also think about not just how students are doing in the middle. For a very long time, we've shot for this idea of proficiency. So what does it look like for the average student, or how do we get all students to proficiency? But we really want to see how students do on both ends. We want to know what kind of supports we need for students that are performing above average, that are kind of at that higher tail, and then at the lower tail, and those students that need additional supports and interventions. Another really great thing that I didn't mention is that these assessments are designed to be computer-based assessments. So during the Race to the Top assessment grant competition, to which the states were awarded this money to develop the aligned assessment, aligned common assessment system, one of those was that the assessment would be able to be a next-generation assessment and delivered online. That's really exciting, too, because as we actually do online delivery, it allows us to give more timely feedback to teachers and students on strengths and weaknesses. It allows teachers to better meet student needs. This doesn't just mean for the summative assessment and having a quicker turnaround for the scores in the future, but this also means that a lot of the tools and resources that we're developing are actually digital tools and resources. And they're all built on the same platform, so they align. So when you actually look at student scores and performance over time, whether or not it's non-summative or summative work, you're getting a really cool or really great sense of what that student is doing, how they're succeeding, where they may need extra support over time. Determining whether or not students are on track for college and career readiness. I think that this is something that's incredibly important, especially to the audience on this particular seminar. I will say that ACT was a great partner. It helped us do a lot of vetting around what is called our college and career readiness determination policy, which I'll speak to in just a little bit. But one of the primary pieces of the development of this assessment system is saying what is in it for students at the end of the day. Students are familiar that they have to take standardized tests, they have to take state tests. But a lot of times they associate that with, well, my parents say that I have to do well. Well, my teachers say that I have to do well. So we thought, what would be better than incentivizing student performance by saying that at the end of the day, if a student did well enough on their high school end of course exams in either Algebra 2, Integrated Mathematics 3, or ELA 3, or that 11th grade English Language Arts course, that student, if they scored at a level 4 or 5, could actually earn a college and career ready determination. It would act as a placement score, placement indicator in institutions of higher education to place them out of remediation and directly into first-year credit-bearing courses. This is something that we really haven't seen in K-12 assessment systems that really kind of marks that pathway in college and career readiness, not just in that transition space from when they're graduating to when they're arriving on campuses, but also that entire continuum leading up to it. Including a writing component at every level. When we're talking about the Common Core State Standards, we talk about literacy across the curriculum. We talk about how reading and writing are connected at every point. I think that the writing component is incredibly exciting. As a former reading teacher, I often had students ask me, why do I have to write in your class? Which made me laugh, but a little bit scared as well. And so including a writing component at every grade level means that we're no longer getting that snapshot of student performance too. A lot of states have actually had writing components delivered them maybe at 5th grade, 8th grade, and then maybe once in 10th grade. Now we're actually seeing student work throughout time. So you can see where students are really doing well and where they may need extra assistance. Using universal design principles to create accessible tests. This is incredibly important. So we've been building these tests based on universal design. And this idea, we talk a lot about access for all. So the idea is that a lot of accessibility features that were only available to students with IEPs, 404, 504 plans, et cetera, were qualified for certain accessibility pieces. Now we have a lot of things available to students, for all students, so that they're able to perform well on the assessment. This includes things like the highlighting feature, which we heard really great things about during the field test, and other accessibility features that you can actually see online. I actually highly encourage you to go to the professional learning modules and play around with them. You can see things like the magnifying tool. You can see the line reader. There are a lot of really great tools and resources so that every student really has access to the test. Really making sure that we're staying in line with this idea of reviewing all the items and making sure that there's no bias within the items. allowing comparison across schools, districts, and states. This idea that we have adopted a common set of standards, so why not have common assessments? Otherwise, we're measuring the same standards but with different yardsticks if we do, in fact, have different assessments. The great thing, too, is that when we're actually building the assessments, when we're doing item reviewers, when we're doing item development, these are cross-state teams. So educators are really sitting down talking to one another, saying, what does it mean to have a good accessible test for my child in Rhode Island? What does it mean to have it in New Mexico? And so that's a really exciting thing. And also we're talking about no longer just looking at maybe the teacher in the classroom next to you or the school next to you in your district, but actually thinking about what successes we can see across similar states, across similar districts, and where we can make improvements. One thing that PARCC Inc. will be doing on behalf of the PARCC Consortium every year is actually issuing essentially a really big lessons learned report and actually analyzing the data and saying, here's where folks are doing really, really well and here's where we're seeing struggles to allow states, districts, and schools to really make adjustments along the way. So right now you're going to see the assessment system. So that's just a little bit up there in your lecture corner about the summative assessments. So this is what's going to be rolling out or is rolling out right now in the 2014-15 school year. You'll see in ELA literacy for grades 3 through 11, there are summative assessments. In math, it's grades 3 through 8, and then there are end-of-course exams for both traditional and integrated math pathways. There's both two components of the summative assessment. There's performance-based and end of the year, and we're offering both computer-based and paper-based. And that was really up to schools, districts to talk to their state and say whether or not they have the technology capacity to deliver the assessments online or if they need a little bit of extra time and need to deliver the paper-based exam.
Hi, Kelly. Sorry to interrupt for a minute. We're having a little trouble hearing you. Is there any way you could fix your mic volume a little bit? It's a little bit muffled for some of our listeners.
Sure. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you better. If anyone has a problem, feel free to write in the chat box if you're having any problems hearing Callie during the presentation. It was just really muffled, and you were going in and out at the first time.
Okay, my apologies. I hope folks that were able to understand most of what I was saying. Please let me know if you can't understand. Again, I'm on a headset in the middle of an airport, so it's a little difficult. And so I'm going to start here actually with the lower left-hand corner about what the assessment system is measuring. You'll see the assessment system is not only measuring that writing component I was talking about before, but also reading, critical thinking, mathematics, math reasoning, and problem solving. The great thing is when you look at the assessment, you'll see that it is truly a Common Core standards aligned assessment. And so actually I've been looking at prototypes of score reports, and the way that we have things reported out are broken out and actually into the claims and subclaims that are based upon the Common Core state standards. You'll see that there's incredible consistency among even the verbs that are used, how we're asking questions, how we're reporting the data. And so nothing really should be a surprise as to why the assessment items are built the way they are. We talked about one of the reasons why we use computer-based assessments is that a lot of these times these items are more engaging for students because they are interactive. Again, that idea that there are results that teachers can use, and also the more states that actually sign and go online, the more cost-effective they are. So we're really doing that economies of scale piece and allowing states to get an incredibly high-quality assessment for a very, very low price point. So here you can actually see the entire assessment system. And what you'll notice is this is the circle, which has the different components, but it also shows kind of the way that different pieces of this information feed into one another. So I'm actually going to start with the bottom part, though, that purple section. And you'll see over there the performance-based assessments is that first part of the summative assessment that I was talking about. In English language arts, that'll be where you actually see students doing compare and contrast, writing to sources, where they have multiple texts or they have a multimedia resource plus a static text that they compare and contrast. They have to draw evidence from. These are those longer form writing tasks. In math, you're going to see those longer word problems, reasoning, modeling, asking students to actually explain their answer. I think that this is actually one of the most innovative parts of the assessment. Computers are great, but what's really great is seeing such high quality items on a large scale assessment. We're asking students to walk through and show us how there are multiple ways to get to the same answer. This is really neat to see how students are solving problems in many different ways. You can have a student, especially, I was doing a demonstration with a high school teacher that's been teaching to the standards recently, and she was talking about how she groups kids and how they'll have 6 groups of students and 6 approaches to solving the same problem with still the same answer. This is one of the things that we're really trying to replicate on the assessments because, good assessment looks like good instruction and vice versa. That performance-based assessment piece is just one component of the summative assessments. It's delivered around the 70% mark of the year. And then the next component of the assessment system, and these two are combined for the full summative assessment score, is the end-of-year assessment. And that's where you're going to see a lot of those innovative, what we call innovative task types, a lot of the technology-enhanced items. There's, drag and drop. There's reorganizing. It's a really interactive part of the test. That's also all computer scored, whereas the performance-based assessment is going to be hand-scored, at least for the first couple of years. And so the end-of-year assessment allows us to really turn around that data really quickly as well. So I've already walked through what the summative assessments are, but this just gives you an idea, and I'm sure that this will be shared with you afterwards. And again, you can see there that the PBA and EOY, as we affectionately call them, combine for the total score for that student's end of the year, or for that student's summative assessment score. And there's the practice test. The formative tools. You saw in that circle graphic that there were a lot of formative tools or non-summative tools that were currently being developed. And so we'll just walk through those really quickly so that we have time to review a couple of other things. But first of all, I'll start off with the diagnostic assessments. We are developing diagnostic assessments in grades 2 through 8. They're computer adaptive, and there are multiple components that get at the reading, writing, and mathematics. They're designed to pinpoint some strengths and weaknesses, and one of the neat ways that the assessments are being designed is that teachers no longer actually have to just give the same diagnostic assessment to all students in a class. If I have a class of 30 students, chances are those 30 students are in different places. So I may want to actually measure based on a standards progression. I may want to pinpoint one particular standard. I may actually want to look at a standards cluster. And so if you think about this, it's like having lots and lots of little pieces that you can fit together. So you can say, oh, gosh, I really want to measure one standard with 5 of my students, but I want to look at a cluster with another 5. You can do that. And so that's a really cool feature of the diagnostic assessments. And those are being built that way because that's what educators said that they wanted and during the design phase. We will be field testing the diagnostic assessments come springtime, and so really exciting to see what the feedback is on those. Then you'll also see the mid-year and interim assessments that will be available for grades 3 through 11. These are performance-based assessment tasks, computer and paper-based test modules. Teachers can just use these as interim or benchmark assessments within their classrooms. Again, everything that you see up here on the screen is a tool for teachers to use in their classrooms that aligns to summative assessments, so it's not a surprise. Everything is very consistent. Everything is just a very clean process. And those performance-based assessment tasks will look like the PBAs that are delivered on that first assessment component. We're also developing what should actually say K1/2 tools with reading and math. Those include checklists, running records, performance tasks. And the neat thing, too, is that I always think of them as being kind of invisible embedded tasks. So asking students to do an activity, just like early childhood educators always do. But then actually, say the teacher would have a tablet that they carried around with them that would have that running checklist, all the students' names populated. And so they're actually able to check off different observations that they're seeing, or maybe they're not seeing. And at the end of the day, they can run reports and link out to different interventions or enrichments based on where students are in their performance. The idea is to just give teachers information about where their kids are to allow them to make adjustments in their instructional practice. And then lastly, I think is really exciting is that the Common Core standards have these really amazing speaking and listening standards. They really bring to life the standards. They make them dynamic. They connect that idea of not only reading and writing, but also speaking and interacting. I always talk about how I have some friends that are amazing writers. They write for very big publications, but I've seen them on panels. I've seen them do Q&A sessions. I've seen them give presentations. they can't do it. So really connecting that and saying, okay, if a student produces a piece of work, what does it look like when they give a presentation? What does it look like if they engage in a classroom discussion? What is that? How do we measure that as well? So we have a really great dynamic team of educators that are actually developing these speaking and listening assessments along with our team, and we're piloting those right now. But these are really neat things, especially for those of you that are in the career and technical education space, too, because I know a lot of times you talk about portfolio assessment. And I think the speaking and listening assessments are a really great way to integrate this Common Core State Standards piece, to look at them for a lot of interest from districts about how they can use the speaking and listening assessments for their portfolio pieces. All of the formative tools are optional, and we will be making more information available about how district schools, states can purchase those. These for a very small fee, and really the fee is just there to make sure that we can continue to develop items in the assessment. So stay tuned as more information comes out about those. So how will PARCC measure college and career readiness? So I will first say that where the Common Core State Standards start and where PARCC does too is that when we talk about college and career readiness, we're talking about those academic pieces that make students successful in whatever they want to do after they graduate from high school. And so I will say that we're starting with that premise. We're saying college and career readiness, at least in the academic sense, is the same thing. So how will the test be scored? I think this is something that we had a lot of debate about. How many levels would we have? A lot of states have only 4 levels. A lot of states only have 3 levels. Knowing that there are going to be these are very different standards and more rigorous standards, we wanted to have a more nuanced sense of how students are actually performing. So you'll actually see that we have 5 performance levels. There you'll see that in grades 3 through 10, a 4 or above for ELA. Indicates a student is on track to be successful in the next grade in each content area. In high school, though, the language starts shifting. So we actually say that, my apologies, a 4 or above will actually earn a college and career ready determined. It's intended to exempt students from placement testing and remediation at public post-secondary institutions. We've worked with a lot of technical colleges as well on this language. They're very intimately involved in it. So you'll see that when we're actually making the statement too, which I think I have on the next slide, that we are talking about technical courses as well. And then we talk about how grades are level 3 below is where we think that students may need targeted early interventions. So saying we're not really waiting until the end of a student's secondary career to say whether or not they're on track, but we're really looking at their performance over time and giving them support before they actually get to the end of their high school career. So what does college and career readiness score mean for students? And you can see right here, there's 2 statements there for English language arts literacy and for mathematics. And so what's really important that I draw you to is that we say they will demonstrate the academic knowledge, skills, and practices necessary to enter directly into and succeed in entry-level credit-bearing courses. In English, it's college, English composition, literature, and technical courses requiring college-level reading and writing. And in mathematics, a similar statement, but college algebra, introductory college statistics, and technical courses requiring an equivalent level of mathematics. So essentially, this is our hypothesis that we're testing, and we're doing a lot of research along the way. We have a lot of higher education faculty, high school faculty involved in actually doing the determination studies, working on the validity studies, participating in things called post-secondary educator judgment studies. They're looking at items and they're saying, if a student performed well on this, would they in fact be successful in my course? So that's already a little bit, I think, of what I've already talked about, but you can get an idea or a little bit better sense of what that means for placement testing at both traditional colleges, technical colleges. And again, when we're talking about college readiness too, we're talking about 2-year, 4-year degree. We're also talking about technical colleges. We're talking about 6, 12, 18-month certificate programs. So really the full range. So again, this actually just shows you the validation statement that we're using to measure this. So that will actually say, this is actually how we'll measure it. At the end of the day, we will be doing longitudinal studies, so we'll be looking at students and how they perform on the PARCC assessments and seeing, in fact, if these college and career ready indicators work. And down there, you'll also see the research studies that we're undertaking with both with K-16 educators, including benchmarking study that includes domestic and international benchmarking, the post-secondary educators judgment study, which I just described, and that longitudinal study of external validity. So one really important thing that happened this year is that we actually field tested the assessments, which was really exciting. So I want to talk a little bit about how the field test went and what's next. So here are the statistics. We actually had over 1,000 students participate in the field test. I think we ended up with about 1.2 million. About 16,000 schools, so if you think about that, it's a lot, in 14 states plus the District of Columbia. The field test, along with our colleagues at Smarter Bounds, was really unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. If you get an idea of how we're delivering the assessment to 5 million students plus this year, 1.2 wasn't so bad, and it gave us a really good sense of the things that were working, things that weren't working as well. So here's what we learned, and these are kind of our big lessons learned, although we just issued an actual lessons learned report, which I highly encourage you to look at if you have the time. It is posted on www.parconline.org. So overall, we learned that the technology system platform worked really well. I think that that's the part that people have been really worried about is, do we have the technology that we need? Do we have the resources? And the truth is not every school and district is in the same place, and that's okay. But we did learn that schools and districts employed a few different strategies to make sure that they were able to deliver the assessments in a really efficient manner. That includes actually looking at the different technology guidance, not only the devices, but also how to administer the assessments. We had a couple different options for states and districts that we'll still have this spring as well, where they can either deliver the assessment online and have it live streaming, or they can do something kind of cool, well, I think it's cool, called proctor caching, which is essentially you download the online assessment, and then students take it, and then they upload everything after students get offline. So this means that you can actually upload all the information when the students are no longer in school, when they're no longer test taking. So it actually takes the burden off of the broadband at that time and waits until it's no longer needed. Students took less time than anticipated. There have been a lot of conversation about how these tests take more time. They take more time because there are fewer tasks, but they're more involved tasks. You'll see that we have multi-step problems where we have interdependencies there. Students really have to reason through whether or not Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D fit. Also, that writing component adds a lot of time, but it really mirrors what we're doing in classes anyway. You wouldn't give a student a 45-minute writing task and ask them to do it in 15 minutes and expect the same results. So we wanted to make sure that the students' work was quality and that they had enough time to produce something that's quality. The exciting thing, though, is that we actually overestimated the amount of time that students would need. And so we were able to make adjustments and actually cut, especially the number of items that we needed in the lower grade levels. We do have online practice tests and tutorials, and we found that those really set students up for success. So using that online technology tutorial, having students practice things like the equation editor for mathematics and the online highlighting tool and the line reader meant that they were able to function pretty quickly. Students really took to the different tools that were online, but at the same time, we don't want students to see those things for the first time when they first log in. And so this is the feedback that we got overwhelmingly, was that really just taking a little bit of time to practice with it yields dividends. And then the test administration manual data refinement. Funny enough, I guess, you can't give necessarily the same instructions to third graders as you would to 11th graders. So we actually went back and rewrote all of the test administration manuals. So you'll see that there's a different one for every single grade level. And here's a little bit about what we heard. We have these nice little bubbles here. So I already went over a little bit about what teachers said, but I think more interesting is what students had to say. So they did notice that you had to go back into the text to find the evidence, to look for the answers. So they couldn't just find the answer in the question, which too often is the way that standardized tests are actually written. They liked the fact that it made them think. We actually have a lot of really positive response from students. It is important to note that every student that took the test, all 1 million plus, had the opportunity to fill out a survey that not only included things like, did your technology work, but what did you think? Did you like it? Did you find the items engaging? And for the most part, they did, especially in the elementary and middle school ages, where this is something that they're used to doing. They're used to interacting with technology. They liked the idea that there was embedded multimedia resources, that they were able to hone in on different pieces of the text. There was toggling, and so that was really neat to see that what we thought students might enjoy, they in fact did like in this environment. And then my favorite quote there, and I actually remember when my colleague discovered this, but said that yes, there are hard parts, but there's always going to be hard questions in life. And I always say, it's good that kids learned it early. But that was true. So students were willing to actually persevere through these more rigorous questions. They weren't that scared of them. And so that was nice to see that students were able to engage in the productive struggle of actually learning while taking the assessment, which in fact good tests and good assessments means that students are learning new information at that time and are able to apply what they know to new concepts. So what's next? We just talked about the field tests, and currently we're in fall block administration, so that will go through the middle of January. The first full-scale PARCC assessment will start February 16th and go through June 5th. So that's when we'll actually see, I think there's about 30,000 students participating in fall blocks. So that's when we'll see really right around 5 billion actually take the test. And then we'll be releasing results after we do cut score level setting, a very, very rigorous process in late summer. So we'll be releasing the test results in the fall. That is a more traditional release time, but that's because we have to do a full-scale administration before we actually set the cut scores. That was incredibly important for us to have all of the student information, all of that data, and that we didn't base the scores off of a field test, which is a test of the test, not a test of students, but actually base it off of how students did on the full assessment. Every year, you'll actually see the release of that test or those test results move forward. The idea is that as more states and districts are able to administer the test online, we can continue to move that date up. I think that most districts and schools are used to getting test results back around November. And aren't quite sure what to do with it. So the idea that you could get results back before the next year's school year, really close to the end of the school year, is really exciting because that allows you to help students plan over the summer. It allows students to figure out what it is they need and gives teachers information about the students actually coming into their classroom. But again, those are just the summative assessments, and we are releasing the non-summative tools in which those will really help teachers make those good instructional decisions throughout the year and not have to just wait for those summative scores. So what type of PARCC resources are available for educators? I wanted to just show you a few of these things. And so actually this is available November 2014. It'll actually be available, I think, by the end of this week. We are developing an Instructional Leaders Toolkit that takes a lot of things like FAQs, tools, and resources and puts them in one nice little place. So that'll be at http://parcforleaders.org. You'll see that it's currently password protected, but it will be open very, very shortly. We'll put an announcement about that. And these are all downloadable resources. You can actually customize them to how you want to display them at your school. You can put your own logo on them. But really kind of distilling out all the good information on the PARCC website into things that are really easy for educators and leaders to use. Professional learning modules. We do have 2 professional learning modules available right now, and we're working on others. So you can actually take them. They have little interim quizzes. You can check your knowledge. You don't have to view the module all at the same time. You can view them in bits and pieces or in videos on just particular topics that you're interested in. You'll see that we have available the overview and the accessibility system. We also have ones coming on the mid-year assessments, the diagnostic assessments, and speaking and listening. We recently also partnered with ASCD and Apple Distinguished Educators and our PARCC Educator Leader Cadre members, which is our extensive network of teacher leaders, to develop 23 courses that are available for iTunes U download. They're all free, and they're neat because they include really great seeds for lessons and units, great resources, apps, iBooks, different things that educators have actually used in a digital environment, a technology-based environment in their classroom to meet the standards. So they're giving an idea of like what they really liked using, where they saw students engaged. And they're all put in these really nice collections. So I really encourage you to go online. It's a bit of a labor of love to put this together, but you'll see a lot of really neat things that you can use in their classroom. We also have a series of PBS learning media, CLOs, which are called Customized Learning Objects, and they're essentially communications tools. So if you are having a night with your teachers, it might be great to, say, bring up the PARCC for Educators video there and actually toggle through and look at what's available and have some teachers that have been involved in the process talk about their involvement. Similar for higher education and also for parents. We partnered with the National PTA on that parent one, and I think it's really great to see parents talking about what they can do for their schools and helping their kids succeed with the new standards and the new assessments. We are currently transitioning our Educator Leader Cadre portal. Oh, CLO, great question. Customized learning object, but just think of them as kind of mini websites that you can click on different videos and bring up other resources. Thank you, Terry. So the Educator Leader portal is a portal where we've had all of our educator resources housed, and we're actually transitioning that to the Teaching Channel Team platform. So very soon, all of the resources that we've developed for educators over the past several years will become available on the Teaching Channel. That includes an entire series that we've partnered with NEA and AFT and the Teaching Channel on how to use different PARCC tools and resources to make instructional decisions to develop products in your classroom. So this is all very exciting. Our partnership with the Teaching Channel has been really wonderful and has allowed us to really think about how it is that we deliver resources to educators, how we create things that are quick, easy, efficient, engaging. So I encourage you to look out for an announcement about when that is coming. Another thing that we're launching is actually called the Take the Test website. And so you'll actually see that we're encouraging lots of folks, everyone, teachers, parents, students, to take the practice test and see what it's all about. We have a lot of states that have been hosting these events all over the state, and it's been really exciting to see what they've done and the feedback that they've gotten. It will have a guided practice test experience and show old items versus new items. So you can actually see what it looks like, what we were doing before and what we're doing now is different. And then we also have something called a Top 12 Resources for Educators guide that we have available that lists out pretty much everything that I have here in the rest of the presentation online. So if you go to the PARCC Online website and then type in the search box Top 12, this will come up and it'll lead you right to all of the resources. And then right here, I'm actually just going to skim through this. You'll see a lot of other resources that are available that essentially were created because this is how we built the test. This is how we got educator input and how we decided what the performance levels mean or what student performance is going to look like. Again, I think that these are really great resources to go through because you'll just see the consistency of language from the standards. If you love the standards, there's a good chance you will really like this test, to be completely honest. You'll see that we tried to be really thoughtful with the input of all of our teachers, our leaders, our policy experts about how it was that we were going to translate standards into a good assessment. And just clicking through here, and I know that you'll see this afterwards, if you haven't done the sample items yet, I highly encourage you to do that. You can actually do them in their native, in their online format. And so you can go through and actually play with the items. I always say I encourage you to start with grade 3 and then work your way up. But you can see how, especially with the performance-based assessment tasks, these are things that you can translate into your classroom. These are things that you can actually take out of the quote-unquote online environment and make them real tasks. And, you can cut boards in your class according to the way that the cutting the board task is set up. You can really model those real world problems, which especially in mathematics is what our tasks are intended to do. And then there's that technology tutorial that I talked about. So at this point, I'm going to ask if you all have any questions. But at the same time I'm asking for questions, I am putting up information on the screen here. You'll see that there's my email address, briley@parcconline.org, and then a couple of my other content colleagues' addresses here. I also encourage you to follow us on Twitter as @ParcClace. We have about 18,000 followers and climbing every single day. I do manage our social media presence, so you'll find that we try to push out as much information as possible. In addition, I really encourage you to sign up to the PARCC Updates newsletter. You'll see that's where that's pointing to, is where it says stay informed. You can put your email in there, and you'll get all of the information as soon as we release it. So with that, I am happy to open it up for questions.